This episode and others in this series are dedicated to all of the people I have known and loved who have been and are still affected by the opioid crisis. Some of them are still with us, others sadly have passed on, but they remain in our hearts and mine specifically. We miss you. For those of you who are still kicking, you got this 1 second at a time. Welcome to Hellbilly, the darker side of Appalachia. Just a friendly reminder not to whistle, sing, or scream in the darkness because you might find yourself surrounded by skinwalkers or someone who might be there to steal your catalytic converter or some copper wire. Either way, it won't be pleasant. Tonight on Hellbilly is the first episode 1 of our series on addiction, beginning with opioids. And I figured that would be a good place to start because, well, it is the place to start, essentially. You think of Central Appalachia, you think of two things probably, aside from coal and our dialect, opiates and meth. And we'll get to the other one. Believe me, that's my favorite topic. One of them. But we're going to start with opiates because that's where it really all began. So when I was sitting down and I was like thinking out this episode, I recorded one and I was like, oh, and I was talking to my producer and we were kicking it over and I was like, it's just not the vibe. It's not vibing. I don't know something it's not hitting. So I scrapped it and I decided to do it again. And this is take 2 of episode 1. And what better place to start than perhaps at the beginning? And a lot of you may already be aware of the information I'm about to throw at you. Yeah, to be fair, it's going to be a lot. So sit back, grab some snacks, buckle up if you're driving, keep your eyes on the road, 10 and 2. And you may have already heard it before. It was in a book that was turned into a miniseries on Hulu called Dope Sick. We'll also get into the back meaning of that term eventually. So it may read or come across as a little bit of like, oh, I already know this, Cal. Why are you telling me all about it? Well, some people may not. And so we're just going to be nice and quiet while I catch everybody up to speed who may not understand. Sure. Off we go. In 1996, and I did promise you that I would link Cole back to this because there is a link back to Cole and this. In 1996, Purdue Pharma, run by the Sackler family, hiss, ack, boo, shame, picked a few places to disseminate a new drug that they had, I guess, unveiled. I don't want to say concocted because I'm really not sure if they had concocted it or if they had just decided to market it. That is still something that is unclear to me. But Pennington Gap in Lee County, Virginia, that's Southwest Virginia, and a lot of this is going to take place in the Tri-Cities, which again, Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, Johnson City, Tennessee, and Kingsport, Tennessee, the outlying areas of Southwest Virginia and Northeast Tennessee. And Lee County, Pennington Gap, is one of those areas. And so Purdue Pharma specifically targeted Pennington Gap, and that is not speculation, that is truth. In fact, it came out eventually, and an article in the Palm Beach Post spoke about it, that Pennington Gap, along with some other areas that ran the length of the Appalachia Mountains, all the way up to Maine, were targeted primarily because of the work that the people did there. For Pennington Gap, it was primarily coal-based, logging-based work. Construction as well, but mostly coal and then some logging. Because this work was hard. It was incredibly vicious on your body. It was like, when I say back-breaking, I mean literally back-breaking. People's backs broke at times because of accidents. So, I mean it. It was bad. And I don't know what it looked like at headquarters at Purdue. It was probably like some kind of Austin Powers Dr. Evil lab where they were like, ho, ho, ho. And they were like, oh, look, there's a lot of people in this area who are in pain. Let's try this out on these unsuspecting, ignorant people. And I'm not kidding. That's not a joke. So they sent their pharma reps to these places with some notes. And the notes said the following: less than 1% of people get addicted to OxyContin, despite the fact that OxyContin is oxycodone in its purest form, which is more potent than morphine. It can be prescribed, they said, for mild and moderate pain. So, poor baby, you stubbed your toe, here, have an Oxy. Oh, you have a broken arm, try some Oxy. You hurt your back in the mine, here, have an Oxy. Whereas before, it was prescribed for cancer patients, primarily, and that's how they marketed it. So non-cancer patients can now take this. Oh, that's fantastic. What a breakthrough. Then they were also saying, oh, hey, guess what? Guess what? This is the best part. You ready for it? Wait for it. You're waiting? It was what? No, you're kidding. 12 hours without pain. You could sleep through the night. That was unheard of. Unheard of. Because most painkillers had huge peaks and valleys in their graphs. They would peak and then they would slump. So they would reach a peak effect and then pew, drop off. Pain would come back. Pew, up, no pain. Euphoria. I'm in heaven. This is bliss. I'm in hell. What the fuck just happened to me? But Purdue claimed that the OxyContin came without that euphoric sense. And it had less peaks and valleys. It was more like, rolling hills on the graphs. And they somehow got the FDA to slap a label on it that said this was all, copacetic. Cool. They were like, all right, slap, slap. And there you have it. The hills are alive with the sound of music. A marketable drug that they decided was going to change the world. And it did. They weren't wrong. Just not in the way that we thought. I can't say it wasn't in the way that they thought, though, because after researching this extensively, treating this in my career extensively, I really just am on the fence. And I'm leaning toward the fact that they were hoping that people would get addicted to it because it made them more money. But we'll get into that. So they come to Pennington Gap, 1996. And we're not going to talk about the other towns because they're not the focus of this podcast, but they were there too. They were going there. And, they're like, hey, put your people on this. And the doctors were like, I don't know. I'm a little hesitant about this. This is goes against what I have believed to be true based on medical journals for ever. And Purdue had to address this and brought on some well-known pain specialists. In fact, I think one of the doctors' last name was Portnoy, and another one eventually was Haddix. And ultimately, we would find out that Purdue had a habit of buying out anyone that they could who dissented, because to them, everyone could be bought. They had all the money. They had more money than anybody ever needs to have, to be honest with you. I mean, nobody needs to have that much money. It's basically like your smog sitting on your mountain of treasure. What are you going to do with that? I don't know, guard it. Are you going to use any of it? No. So why do you have it? Because I can. So what are you going to do? I'm going to give more. Why? Because I can. Because I want it. Well, if you're not going to do anything with it, I just want it. I want it. I want all the money. That was the logic. I just want all the money. And as I had mentioned before, growth at all cost. Greed. And that's what led to everything that came out. So doctors were swayed by the buy-in from experts in the field who were like, yes, no, this is a miracle drug. This is fantastic. And Purdue would host these lavish retreats in certain areas like Scottsdale, Arizona, or Orlando, just places where it's like, come to this conference and we'll tell you about it. And it's fantastic. It's wonderful. It's great. But then things started shifting. And what the doctors realized was that their patients were not actually sleeping through the night. They were waking up in the middle of the night with pain. They were hitting that peak and then the valley, boom, boom, on a 10 milligram to start dose schedule. And the reports started rolling into Purdue. So one of the doctors, maybe Portnoy, maybe someone else, decided to come up with a term called breakthrough pain, which up to this point did not exist. There's no such thing as breakthrough pain. It was the fact that the medication wasn't doing what they claimed it would do. It was doing what it was supposed to do, which was peaking and then decreasing in the body based upon metabolism and half-life. So they recommended individualistic dosing, starting off at 20 or 40 milligrams, depending upon the person and whatever injury or ailment was brought in there. So the doctor was given, essentially, by my understanding, discretion to make that dosage on an individual basis. Like, let's say that I don't know, like I tripped and fell and my arm was hanging off. The doctor could be like, oh my God, let's stitch you up. How about we start you on 80 milligrams of oxy? I'd be like, whoa, bro, that's a lot. And he would be like, no, you just almost lost your arm. And I would be like, okay, you're the doctor. That's probably a good idea. Why not? Then there were other times where people would come in and be like, oh man, I tore my rotator cuff. And a doctor could be like, okay, well, simple surgery or something. Not saying it is a simple surgery, but it's different than almost losing your arm. And we'll start you on 40 or 60 or 20. It was a discretionary thing. So at that point, it was just like the whole thing went cattywampus. Everything was up in the air. Like, okay, this is a free-for-all. And people were becoming addicted. Shocker. What? You don't say. But I thought you said a minute ago that less than 1% of people became addicted. I did say that, actually, because that's what they said. Oh, well, about that. Turns out that Purdue took a 5-sentence letter to the editor from a doctor who did a study on individuals in a hospital setting, a controlled setting, in a hospital, completely different setting, completely different cohort of people, and found that less than 1% of people in that setting became addicted to painkillers. That makes sense in that setting. But they took that and they twisted it. Shocker again. Shocker squared. They were manipulating data. And we will soon find out that they were manipulating graphs as well. Please pause for a brief explanation. On the vertical, you have a y-axis. On the horizontal, you have an x-axis. On the vertical, the middle should be 50, or whatever the middle point is. They had made it 30 and squooshed everything up top to make it look like there were less peaks and valleys. And they gave that to the FDA, and somebody on the FDA was on the inside. They were on the take, and they were like, all right, cool, bet. We'll stick that sticker on there, slap, pow, done. Because they had to submit all of their graphs, all of their data, to the FDA in order to get the specific label that they were hoping to get. So, FDA was not really innocent in all of this either. Well, parts of them at least. Because a couple of them jumped ship and went over to Purdue and made much more money than government money. But you know what? I guess if that's your thing, I don't know. So, we come back to Pennington, and it's just this sleepy little tiny little town in Southwest Virginia. Like, super tiny. The population has decreased significantly from the 90s to now, but it hasn't been over 2,000 people. I think at best in the 90s it was like 1,700 people, and now it's like at best 1,500 or less in 2024 based on a census, so it's decreasing, and I'm not going to speculate as to why, but you can if you want. So it's a very tiny little town. It's a little baby town, but it's full of really, really good people, and these really, really good people were becoming really, really sick. And I believe it was Macklemore who was like, my doctor is my drug dealer. Well, that became the case. And for some, I do want to make a statement here. For some doctors, they knew what they were doing. The pill mill thing is a real thing. They knew what they were doing. They spent time in jail. a good portion of them. But for some, they did not. And for some, they became addicts themselves. It's basically everybody that touched the damn drug became addicted to it. Not everybody, because some people didn't, because brain chemistry or lack of trauma in their lives, community, a whole host of reasons why people don't become addicts. And then there are brain things. It is a brain disease. So nonetheless, and we can get into the dynamics of that in a different episode. I digress. Pennington Gap is about an hour and 15 minutes away from Bristol. The drug started making its way to the Tri-Cities because that was a bigger area. It was populated more densely. And the drugs started being distributed, so on and so forth. You know, the ball started rolling, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And there you go. Oxycontin invaded Southwest Virginia and Northeast Tennessee. 1996 through roughly about 2007. Sometime in between, it was replaced with more focus on heroin. I can't say heroin without seriously thinking about the Transplant song. I don't even remember the name of it right now, and they call it Heron in it. It's Diamonds and Guns. That's the name of the song, Diamonds and Guns. Diamonds and Guns. And I'm literally singing that in my head every time somebody says heroin. I'm like, Diamonds and Guns. Diamonds and Guns. Because now the daylight's gone and there's no more fun. And who's the fucking bitch who stole all the hair off? My apologies for that unscheduled trip down memory lane. Yeah, well, that's what Bristol became, and Johnson City in Tennessee, and still is to this date. Exactly that. But a big difference is that things have gotten darker. But if we back up a little bit more, eventually people got hip to it. They were like, all right, gotcha. Purdue marketed it as, you know what? This isn't an us problem. This is a them problem. Those fucking hillbillies, they're just addicts. They can't handle their dope. They probably can't even handle their liquor, even though they make moonshine in the holler. They can't handle anything, literally. That's why they live there. That sounds like a them problem, not an us problem, okay? And continued to do what they did, and they came out with like 160 milligram pills before it all came crashing down. Which, whoa. But either way, people were dying. The DEA was involved. The Virginia Attorney General was involved. Maine's Attorney General was bought out by Purdue. Looking at you, Attorney General from Maine during that time. I can't remember your name because your name is unimportant because you're a piece of shit. Good for you, guy. Well done. And ultimately, what happened was a couple of things. First off, there was a doctor, last name Haddix, who came and said, there is no such thing as addiction. It's pseudo-addiction, and the answer is to give these people more drugs. Give them more drugs. I'm pausing for a minute so you can take that in because I know, right? Like, what? Give them more drugs. They're already robbing the pharmacies and killing old ladies in apartments in Bristol. I remember that, actually. They're not addicted. This is not an addiction. Let's give them more drugs. Just give it to them. It'll be fine. It'll be totally fine. I think street value at the time for an 80 was like $100. I don't know what it is right now. I used to know. But yeah, no such thing as addiction. What a tool. Looking at you, Dr. Haddix. And then finally, in 2007, Purdue sold out 3 people to take the fall. They ended up being misdemeanors. And all of this went down in Abingdon, Virginia, which is just outside the city lines of the Tri-Cities. It's basically a part of it. And my home area, federal court, they pled guilty to a bunch of stuff that really didn't matter. And they were fined like, I think, 400 hours of community service or some shit. And $374.5 million. It was $600, but I guess taxes came out of that. I don't know. I don't care. Because the difference between what a person who was caught with paraphernalia and or drugs on their person, even if it's a little bit, versus these people who literally created a nightmare and forced doctors to push the drugs onto people lest they be sued, got a slap on the wrist, and Purdue, who had billions of dollars, only had to pay out like, I don't know, 370 some $1 million at the end of the day. Wow. For justice, much win. But it was the first blow that the company took. And in 2019, people really started fighting back against the Sacklers. Their names were removed from like museums. People stopped taking donations from them. They started having to answer for their sins, so on and so forth. But it was too late. It was too late. Nobody cared. I mean, it was too late. People were already dying. If not dead completely, they were dying a soul death. Some were getting clean, which was a very hard thing to do, but possible. It works if you work it, or whatever program you choose to do. But the damage was done. And Macklemore was right. The doctors were inadvertently and sometimes advertently the drug dealers. And Purdue was the cartel. Well done. Well played. But then we bring fentanyl into the mix, along with Suboxone and Subutex and methadone. Suboxone, Subutex, and methadone were medications that were used to help people transition, harm reduction, if you will, off of opiates and live regular lives, kind of like a diabetic treats diabetes with insulin. And there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, you're just trading one for another. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. I really don't. If it saves lives, then save it, because I just don't care. But that came with its own problem, because methadone was abused by some people. Subutex was abused. Suboxone became the drug of choice, and it still is a drug of choice for a lot of people around my hometown. And the best part about that was that they said numerous things about it, like, oh, it can't be shot. Yes, it can. It's not addictive. Yes, it is. So the takeaway is that if a nightmare was created, this web was woven. What tangled webs we weave when first we practice to deceive. And that tangled web was woven by Purdue. Not to say that heroin and all of that didn't exist to begin with, but it wasn't as much of a problem in the area until hillbilly heroin as Oxycontin came to be known. And it spiraled from that point forward, because it is hella hard to come off of Oxycontin. And then fentanyl came. And I don't know who the fuck, Satan himself, maybe? I have no idea who created fentanyl. I did not look that up. I did not feel like looking that up today on this particular episode, because, my God. But, like, brother, why are you mixing that in everything? Who is doing that? Because that's what's happening with fentanyl. Yes, it takes less to get high, sure, but you can't do, like, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I can do such and such an amount of this. No, now you're dead. But also, people started adding it to pills that they were pressing and marketing as like Xanax or other benzos or MDMA. They were adding it to weed, of all things, marijuana. Like, why are you targeting the potheads? All they do is just chill. They're eating some fucking burritos, bro. And you're putting fentanyl in their weed and then they're dying? What the hell? Jeez, crows. So fentanyl comes and people are like, wow, okay, we don't even know, like, ooh. And I was working in a treatment center during the time that fentanyl was like coming around the Tri-Cities. And we were told to do bag checks. I was a therapist, but if we were shorthanded, I would help. And we had to double glove or something because we couldn't touch it, because we could die by touching it because it was so potent and blah, 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 blah. Like, it was a whole thing. And I don't know how much of it was sensationalized, but I do know that many people I know have died because of it. I'm thinking of an artist, Lil Peep. He died because of it. Numerous people have died because of it, because it was mixed in with drugs that, to be fair, it shouldn't be mixed in with. And the question becomes, why? So we go from Oxycontin, and I want you to imagine a calendar going from 96 to 2026. Do the math. 96, 2006, 2016, 26, 40 years, people, 40 years later. And a synthetic opiate is being purposefully mixed in with other drugs. Welcome to hell, Billy. That's called murder. Because if you don't know what you're taking, then you don't consent to it. So if you go out, and I don't give a shit if you're buying it off the street. If you go out and you're buying however many Klonopin and you're buying fake Klonopin pressed with fentanyl, you're being murdered because you're not getting what you paid for. And there are a lot of people out there who blame the addict. Well, if they wouldn't do it, then they would still be alive. It doesn't work that way, my friend. Wish it did. Really wish it did. Getting clean is an everyday thing, and it's hard, and it takes people a lot of attempts most of the time, and it is not a moral failing. I mean, shit, if the introduction of OxyContin into Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and the Tri-Cities didn't explain that to you, I don't know how much more I can tell you. It's not a moral failing. It was a targeted, purposeful event to make money off of people's addiction, because the more they sold to people, the more they became addicted, the more they needed, the more they gained in profit. To now, where people are just free for all, mixing fentanyl with whatever they want to. To what end, I have no idea. I will leave you with this. That is the history of how OxyContin took over the Tri-Cities, Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee. But it's not the full story. And we're going to keep going because the full story is with the people. The full story still lives there. Once again, I want to thank you for sitting with me a spell. I do hope you come back again next time because I'll have another story for you to hear, another story to tell. And maybe next time I'll talk a little bit more about how these people were affected, about the people themselves in general. Maybe we'll get a little bit more deep, not so much into the history, but into the lives of the people it touched and continues to touch. Until then, y'all, have a good one. This has been a Strummer's Mom production. Thanks, Frank.